The record for most career wins in the NFL belongs to Tom Brady at 251, only 30 more than second place Adam Vinatieri. The record for most career wins in the NBA belongs to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at 1,074, only 60 more than second place Robert Parrish. The record for most career wins in the MLB belongs to Cy Young at 511, 94 more than second place Walter Johnson. The record for most career wins by an NHL goaltender belongs to Martin Brodeur at 691, 139 more than second place Marc-Andre Fleury. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, it's all to say that while the winningest athletes of their respective sports sit atop the heap, they don't sit comfortably. Vinatieri has 88% of the wins Brady has, Parrish has 94% the wins of Kareem, Johnson has 81% the wins of Young, and Fleury has 80% the wins of Brodeur. These records, while impressive, are far from solidified, and neither are scoring records. Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, and Tom Brady leapfrogged each other a few years ago for the record amount of touchdowns, 649. LeBron James just passed Kareem as the all-time leading scorer in the NBA last season, and while he's still a good ways away, Alex Ovechkin, in his 19th season, continues to creep closer to the NHL goals record, trying to dethrone the Great One at 894. These Herculean records, once thought to be untouchable, have been threatened, tied, and beaten with prejudice, all in just a handful of years. Thanks to the remarkable abilities of these superhuman stars, we have quite literally gotten to see history play out in front of our very eyes, and it only begs the question, how much further can these records go? If these recent events are any indication, the sky's the limit, and it'll be fun to watch the next generation of talent try their hand at achieving immortality. Now, where does NASCAR fit into this? What kind of universal metric can we use to determine the greatness of a stock car driver? Well, to me, that lies with their victories, as while beating 39 other teams is a hell of a lot tougher than just beating one, it's universally understood that the best drivers win the most races. And as of right now, that record in the NASCAR Cup Series sits at 200. So how close is the runner-up? If the trend carries through from other sports, they can't be that far away, right? 105. David Pearson is the second winningest driver with 105, only 52% the wins of the leader. That is utterly insane, but when you consider that Pearson's career ended all the way back in 1986, it just gets worse. The closest active driver to that 200 mark is Kyle Busch, who's currently sitting at 63 victories. Not even a third of the way to the record, and he's heading into his 20th full-time season. There's not a lot of gas left in the tank, and once he retires, the torch will likely be passed to the second highest Denny Hamlin, who's only about a quarter of the way to the top. What I'm trying to say is that the wins record in NASCAR is set in stone. So much so that the prospect of anyone matching it or even halving it in my lifetime is non-existent. Most drivers have enough trouble starting in 200 races, let alone winning them. And with the schedule now being far shorter than it used to be, I am 1,000% confident that this record will forever stand the test of time. But fasten your seatbelts, because this is merely the top of a long list of accolades for the man in the blue 43. When you think of the prototypical NASCAR driver, he's probably who comes to mind, as no matter the era, his career stat line towers over all others. In fact, he was so dominant that by just his 6th of 33 full-time seasons in NASCAR, he was already being called the King, a nickname that would age like fine wine as the years carried on. Now, most sports, like the ones aforementioned, have their own respective kings, but also have an even enough spread of record holders to keep the GOAT conversation going. Well, in NASCAR, it isn't even close. Richard Petty holds such a disgusting amount of records that he is, quite honestly, in a league of his own. So today, I'm going to give you some perspective on just how unbeatable Richard's records are. When it comes to racing records, wins and poles often come hand in hand. After all, if you find your way to the top of the speed charts, you can probably run away in the race. But there are exceptions. Take Ryan Newman, a notoriously strong qualifier who, despite only winning 18 races throughout his Cup career, would find himself starting P1 51 times, enough to put him 9th on the all-time poles list. In this regard, Richard Petty is just as much of an anomaly, but in the opposite way. Despite his 200 race victories, he only took the pole 123 times, a mere 60% of his win total, and in this one case, the runner-up is actually fairly close. Once again, it's the Silver Fox, David Pearson, who wound up just 10 back from Petty, and as for active drivers, the closest is Denny Hamlin with 40. Never mind that he's now 43 years old and in the last leg of his career. If he could double that back and then double it back again, he could threaten the record. In all seriousness though, this is probably the greatest weak point on Richard's resume, though one has to wonder if more poles would have added to his record 51,514 laps led. But in that fact lies a testament to just how great he really was, as even at his lowest, he still sets the standard, and we're just getting started. Another area where Richard claims the throne is in career starts, as from July of 1958 to November of 1992, he raced in 1,184 events. That's a career comparable to stick and ball sports, where they play almost every other day. Though it's important to note that in the 50s and 60s, NASCAR seasons could consist of 40, 50, even 60 races, whereas now they have it capped at just 36. While it is true that Richard had more chances to win than the average Joe today, it doesn't take away from his absurd winning percentage. As even with a decade of downtrodden years late in his career, he won almost 17% of the races he entered. Chop off those 8 years of winlessness, and his percentage still reads a ridiculous 20, meaning that for 25 years, longevity that surpasses most full-length careers, he would win a fifth of the races he started in. 1 in every 5 times he rolled off the grid in the 60s and 70s, he was gonna win. But as they say,
there's a whole lot more to racing than just winning.
You can be second, you can be third, fourth, hell, you can be fifth.
And Richard holds records in each and every spot. In addition to his 200 wins, Richard also has a record 157 runner-up finishes, most of which were to David Pearson, as the two combined to finish nose-to-tail 63 times, also claiming the record for 1-2 finishes from the same two drivers in the process. And you might be surprised to learn that in their battles, it would be Pearson getting the best of Petty 33-30. Despite their discrepancy in total wins, this is the one place where David actually beats Goliath, because in terms of podiums, top 5s, and top 10s, Petty stands alone. When you finish top 10 in a NASCAR race, it's considered a pretty good day. You weren't the best, but you still managed to beat the majority of the field with minimal mistakes and no mechanical failures. This is important because Richard did this 712 times in over 60% of his total starts. What most considered to be a stellar run was just another day in the office for King Richard. And if you want to get even crazier, just take a look at his top 20s, 921 of them. Now granted, this one is more of a formality, as entire fields of cars in the 60s sometimes wouldn't even exceed 20. But that's also what makes it so fascinating. Through his unwavering persistence in an ever-changing sport, only Richard Petty can possibly hold this record. And with longer lineups and tighter competition, there is a 0% chance that anyone in the sport today could even threaten his throne. Now, sustained excellence over a whole career can be tough to achieve, but some might find it more difficult to achieve perfection over a short amount of time. Not in the past 17 years has anyone won 4 Cup races in a row, and not in the past 50 years has anyone won 5 straight, dating back to 1972 with Bobby Allison. That's only the second longest record for consecutive wins, and given what we've already heard, it's probably not shocking to you that Richard leads here too, by twice as much. He won not 6, not 7, not 8, not 9, but 10 races in a row. From August 12th to October 1st, 1967, the only number in victory lane was the 43. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Because of the 49 races run that season, those 10 would contribute to an otherworldly 27-win season. In 1967, Richard Petty won over half the schedule, putting that season's win percentage at 55%. The only full season win percentage to break 50. Even with fewer races on the schedule, no other driver in NASCAR history has ever put together such an impeccable run. To gain the same win percentage today, you would have to win 20 of the 36 races. To win the 27 races in a season, you would have to claim 3/4 of the whole schedule. And to win 10 straight, you would have to claim almost a third of it, with no losses for almost 3 months. The closest anyone has come in the time since was Jeff Gordon in '98, and while his 4 consecutive and 13 total wins were certainly impressive, they still don't even make up half the benchmark. Simply put, Petty wasn't just in another league in '67, he was in another stratosphere. Just another landmark achievement to add to the longest list in racing, and we've still got a few to go. Given the amount of tens, hundreds, and thousands we've seen, the number 7 might sound a bit underwhelming, but don't let it fool you, because that number represents 2 of Richard's greatest achievements. The first is his record in NASCAR's marquee race, as following in his father's footsteps, Richard Petty would win the Daytona 500, and then do it again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and once more for good measure. He has won in 7 iterations of the Great American Race, spanning from 1964 to 1981, and beating the next best, Cale Yarborough, by 3. This includes a 1979 barn burner that would serve as Petty's 15th to final victory, the kickoff to his last championship campaign, and essentially the race that put NASCAR on the map. Even in his last gasp, Petty was making history, and that final championship would continue the trend of lucky 7s, as his record of 7 Cup titles would stand for over a decade. And like his Daytona triumphs, many at the time thought that this record would prove indomitable. After all, the next best at the time was Cale Yarborough, David Pearson, and his father Lee Petty all tied at 3. If the best in the business couldn't even make up for half of Richard's championships, then surely nobody could catch him. Surely no one can match his mark. But some people don't care about the numbers. Some people transcend possibility.
Earnhardt holds him off to win the race and knock down his 7th Winston Cup championship.
I thought nobody'd ever tie Richard Petty or catch Richard Petty's record as championships, but he's still the king. We're 7-time champion now.
Make room! Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt. There's another 7-time champ. Jimmy Johnson wins his 7th NASCAR Sprint Cup championship.
But I will never be the king or the intimidator. I'm just a guy from California who always wanted to race.
With remarkable runs of their own, the generational talents of Dale Earnhardt and Jimmy Johnson have managed to match the king. And while they couldn't dethrone him, they both have a place at his side, proving that not every unbeatable benchmark is truly unbeatable. Those 200 wins, on the other hand, are a different story, and are, in my opinion, Richard's greatest achievement. It's just such a ludicrous number of wins, it doesn't even feel real. Fans of other sports have had the privilege of watching their records be matched, broken, and gapped. But as a NASCAR fan, I've made peace with the fact that I will never see such history. And if you need one more example as to why the king will always be the king, listen to this. I know I might sound like a broken record bringing this up again, but I believe it to be true. Kyle Larson's championship season was the most impressive run we've seen in the past 25 years, collecting a 2021 total of 10 wins. Assuming that someone could put together that kind of season over and over again throughout their entire career, it would take them 20 years to match Richard Petty. And that's while being transcendently consistent for 2 frickin' decades. There are simply no teams, no crew chiefs, no drivers today that can possibly achieve those kinds of numbers. So as we enter another year of hopelessly chasing perfection, I'm here to remind you that perfection has already been achieved, already been hurdled all those years ago. And barring preposterous rule changes or a cyborg uprising in NASCAR, the name of perfection will always be Petty. Thanks for watching.